Hi there. Let me first of all comment a little bit on this Norwegian situation. It is horrible for the parents of the children and the people that have died also in the bomb attack. But I don't think it's indicative of anything. It's not terrorism. It's not part of a larger movement. It's a very simple process that can happen very easily in modern society, and especially in the racially pure areas of Europe. And the way I think it works is that a individual, develops an identity, a more historic identity, because he also sees his ancestors in paintings and he looks like them and he associates with them. This guy is a Christian, so he has a conceptual identity that's not really any physical thing. And he then, based on that identity, you basically start isolating yourself from your environment, differentiating from others. And at a certain point, another element enters, which is that you start feeling superior. And of course, the fascination with that identity might come from the belief that it is superior. And with that superiority, at a certain point, comes vanity, which is being oriented towards yourself and looking at yourself, being narcissistic about it. And then you're done, because then an individual has a self-amplifying sense of superiority, which he feeds with his historic information that he finds relevant to himself. So this guy reads about Christianity, he also writes a whole expose about the Christian religion. Apparently he identifies himself with the Christian religion and considers himself a Christian. So he can take all the superior attributes perceived of that whole lineage of millennia and project it onto himself and feel vain about it. And that's basically where you a mind gets locked into a kind of a mistake, an error. And the whole superiority thing is essential for people not empathizing with other people and deciding to become the law unto themselves, basically, and start, terminology evades me today, but dishing out their own judgment towards the world, or taking a leadership role. You have to. So the natural way, I think, in which individuals develop a leadership role is not so much a decision, but simply a growing awareness of their own superiority. And then, if they are, and then they become leaders, which is natural, because then the other individuals have an example to look towards and to imitate, which is actually doing the things right. So there's nothing unnatural about it. It's just that it can happen in modern society, and if it happens like this in a country where you have a lot of access to weapons, really powerful ones, which I would never want in a country that I would be ruling, then you get this, and it's just an incident, and it can happen again. It's surprising it doesn't happen more often. There's another news item which I find a little bit more shocking, because it affects more people. And this is news that there's on the negotiation table there's this super congress. The super congress, composed of members of both chambers of both parties, isn't mentioned anywhere in the constitution, so it's unconstitutional, but would be granted extraordinary new powers under a plan put forth by the Senate minority leader Mitch McConnell, who is a scumbag, in my opinion. He's just the most vile individual. And his counterpart, Majority Leader Harry Reid, who has been shown to be rather weak. Legislation to lift the debt ceiling would be accompanied with the creation of a 12-member panel made up of 12 lawmakers, 6 of each chamber and 6 from each party. Legislation approved by the Super Congress, which some in Capitol Hill are calling the Super Committee, would then be fast-tracked through both chambers, where it couldn't be amended by simple, regular lawmakers who would have the ability only to cast an up and down vote. Basically, so it would create law that you can veto up and down, but not influence in terms of content. And that would mean, I guess, that if there's a majority or a group of people that forms a majority that agrees with this super committee, then that super committee, 12 people, could make lots of laws and put them in and do some kind of emergency lawmaking. I think that is, when do you need that? Well, if there's an emergency situation in the country, if the normal governmental process doesn't work anymore, and if you have to have extraordinary measures that you cannot debate or discuss, like what I was mentioning about earlier about Stalin, where Stalin took the decisions, and if you're not in favor of the decisions, you would be very often be killed, which is a kind of a barbaric way, but that's a good way to once and for all eliminate opposition, if you're a dictator. So this would mean that the US would have, of course, its existing law, which are already a long way towards granting extraordinary powers to the White House, and it would now have a 12-member lawmaking body that could basically, for instance, write a law that makes all medical care unnecessary in the US, and it would not, well, people would oppose it, but then they were all corrupt, so it's very, very, I think it's quite shocking actually. It's hard to create a real foundation of what I'm about to say, because I believe it for some time, and that's that the Pentagon, that there's basically the basic conflict is between the Pentagon that tries to safeguard the US territory and the US people as far as possible, and the industrialists, which are the Congress in its entirety, because they're all commercially different, they're all have exemptions for inside trading on the stock market, and they're all get funded by industry. The industry that wants to keep going the way we're going right now. So you have let's say the climate denier Congress in its entirety playing around with carbon tax and all that stuff, and trying to abolish the EPA, trying to abolish the FDA, trying to make life super insecure for the American people. And you have the Pentagon that is providing for that whole mechanism by securing the oil and securing the territory, that is really not on board with it, because they are survivors. They are the military. So that's one of the criteria they use. They say, okay, how safe is it? And that's the antagonism. And the White House is primarily always aligned with the military. It has to be, or you would have a military coup, possibly. But it cannot be any other way. So what happens is that if there is a debt ceiling, a debt default, the only reason why you have that default is because the military no longer wants to provide the oil, willy-nilly to an industry that doesn't care for the American people. Maybe there's a complete projection, but if I was in the military and I was, let's say, fighting wars around, it's nice to have this military industrial complex, but it's also, I'm also trained my whole life to survive, to think about that. How do I fight for my life? And the way things are going in industry in the US, it's not fighting for its life at all. So I guess, I'm not sure, but if this new legislative body is created and the debt default occurs, it occurs, I think, because there is a stronger alignment between the White House and the Pentagon. And Pentagon will take over control and make laws that make sense in terms of health. If it's not like that, then it's a more horrible story even, because then you get a small legislative body of greedy people that want to earn more money and have a better life for themselves personally, and they will obliterate the rights of the weak and take everything from everybody. It's like, in both situations, I'd say it's not a very, it's just an unfortunate thing, but it is very clear that leaders these days are not about creative solutions or about solutions at all, and that the banks are the main parties to blame for a lack of ability to respond to problems, because the economical theory say that problems are actually generators of activity and thereby generators of income for industry and producers and all that stuff. So anyway, that's what I have to say today. I'm also still a little bit pissed about the death of Amy Whitehouse. I think it is to blame, the whole drug trade is of course to blame for somebody overdosing in London, and the whole drug trade. Banks are implicated in it. Warren Buffett, Wachovia have been whitewashing or laundering the money from the Mexican cartels. And I rather have a very good soul singer than a bank. That's what just complete. Even in an environment where music is a little bit dominated by copyrights and copyright cartel and all that stuff, it would have been better if she hadn't had access to that drugs. I appreciate the word world more with an extra Amy Winehouse than with an extra guy in a banker job, for sure.